Recently I changed all the coolant hoses in this car. All seemed fine and dandy until I decided to start the car. So after I turn on the car, it has a high idle. Oh, it did have a high idle. I'm gonna try to do a reset and see if that helps. It actually seems like it's doing fine right now, but yesterday was at 2500, which is really high. Could be because I tamper with the throttle body. Maybe I have a leaking vacuum hose. Oh, there you go. See, it's getting a little high. One of the vacuum hoses did split. I zip tied it back. Maybe it's the wrong size. I'm gonna let the car warm up and then continue with the idle reset attempt. In the meantime, turn off all the accessories, AC, radio, anything that could affect the idle. All right, the fan is on. All right, turn off the car. There's a rough stop right there. Okay, now put it on position, but let's not actually start the car. 7 seconds. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Turn it off all the way again. Another 10 seconds. Okay, now foot on the brake, foot brake, start the car, e-brake up, put the car in drive. And do this for 3 minutes. So at 55 or 56. And see what happens. You see the idle went down a little bit. I assume you have the foot pedal pressed down and e-brake up so that you don't actually drive into a wall. Once again, all the electronics are off, radio is off, no AC. This car does not have a BIS screw like the Evo. It's all handled entirely by the IAC, the idle air control valve, and the ECU. So let's see if you can relearn it on its own. All right, it's 57. Let's put it in park. Nope, it didn't do anything. So something is definitely wrong somewhere. Some other things I have tried so far: disconnecting the battery for about 30 minutes, reconnecting it just to see if I could reset the ECU, the fuel trims. I tried adding some more gas in case I was running too low on gas. It was near E before. I don't think I have stabilizer in the tank, so just want to make sure I had some fresh gas. That didn't do anything either. I sprayed soapy water on all the vacuum hoses while the car was running. Engine was running, didn't see any bubbles, didn't hear any hissing noises. Tried disconnecting the coolant temperature sensor. This is a recommendation I saw online. I also tried disconnecting the harness for the idle air control valve. That did not do anything. So in each instance, the idle still stays really high at 2100. If we turn on the AC to full blast, it drops a little bit, but it's still way too high. I'm wondering if the IAC valve or the plunger, if there is one, is stuck open. Let's look at that, or let's consider that possibility later on. And if I turn off the AC, turn off the fan, turn off the AC, turn off the fan, it goes right back up to 2100, which is way too high still. When I turn it off, it's a shutter, very hard stop. So back to the drawing board. So far, most of the things I've been checking are the pieces I removed recently, which is anything past the mass airflow sensor, all the way to the throttle body. Speaking of the throttle body, since it was removed, I also checked the tension on the cable. It's not too loose. It's stopping in the correct place. Let's do some scanning. Let's see if we can find anything. There's no codes. With the engine still off, let's see if we get some data using this Ansel scanner. With the engine off, I was able to check that the coolant temperature sensor is reading correctly, so you actually don't have to unplug that like I did earlier. Some other things I checked are the intake air temperature sensors, the throttle position sensor, just to make sure those are reading correctly. Engine is now running. You get more information that's live, such as the load percentage. More importantly, the short-term fuel trims, that way you know the car is running rich or lean. The map sensor, some updates there. Timing, advance. One thing I am seeing, the O2 sensors. The one on the bottom, 3.2 volts, I heard that is normal. The downstream one that I have highlighted is reading very lean. This ranges from 0 to 1 volt, and as you see is 0.055, which is very lean if I'm looking at it correctly. Let me try a better scanner and see if I can find more detailed information. Unfortunately, that scanner did not show anything else that I didn't know already. So next step is to go back under the hood and start replacing some of the parts that may be compromised. Kind of embarrassing, but this could have something to do with it right here. That would be a massive air leak, as we can see. Let's fix this first. First, I'm gonna loosen this clamp. We're gonna move this out a little bit and clamp it back down. I checked this. Check that the air filter is seated correctly, the housing, everything's airtight. I fixed that tube not sitting correctly. Still the same issue. Let's start replacing parts. I know this thing was messed up, as you can see, my hack here. These two hoses may be split as well. I'm gonna replace all 3 hoses, and let's start with that first. So using calipers to measure these sizes of these fittings, they're kind of a weird size. These 2 vacuum lines are about 4 millimeters, and people use a 2.7 millimeter hose inner diameter from what I read online. This one is about 6 millimeters wide, and online they use a 5.7 millimeter hose. The odd part is the other end of this is a little bit wider. This is like 8, so I don't know if this is an aftermarket part. This is going to be interesting to find a hose with 2 different hose end sizes. This is also kind of embarrassing. If you look back earlier in the video, you will see that I had this throttle body gasket incorrectly mounted. The shape is kind of easy to mix up, reverse, so make sure you get it right. There is also a torque spec for these 3 bolts on the throttle body. I could not get this to torque down. Be very careful not to overstrip this. I just do it hand tight. I think that's good enough. Much better. Sorry for the noise, but still got a little bit of an air leak here. I'm gonna replace this hose first, the long one here. This is a 1/4 inch hose from Advanced Auto Parts. They sell for a little over $1 a foot, which is actually cheaper than Amazon. It's a little bit larger than the 6 millimeters, but let's get it on and see if it fits. Ideally, you want to match the length of the old hose, but since I hacked it all up, I'll just have to estimate it. Whereas this hose is a little too large. This one from Advanced Auto, 7/64, is a little bit too small compared to the old one. Let's try it out anyways and see how close it is. The fitment of the new hoses are a little bit too tight, might be a little bit too restrictive. I'm just going to reuse the old one. I just cut off the crack part. The rest of it's still kind of pliable. I'll just deal with it for now. At this point, when you start the car, the idle stays at 1,000, which is okay. But after a few minutes, it starts creeping up to 1,500, which again is a little bit high. I decided to finally remove the throttle body. Just got to take out the 3 hoses, the 12 millimeter bolts, remove the 2 throttle cables, the 2, I believe, 10 millimeter bolts that hold the mount in place. And here it is. I removed the actual IAC. Many people have problems with these stripping out. These are JIS number 2, not Phillips head. What you can do is just use a Dremel tool to grind the slot and use a big flathead screwdriver to force it out. Same thing with these 2 screws here. One of them I had to grind out. What you want to do first is test to make sure the plunger is not stuck. With the electrical removed, you should be able to turn this. Mine was actually seized, so the root cause could have been that it was seized in place. You could try spraying some intake and carb cleaner. I'm gonna try to clean this up, this gunk, so that it's freed up. It could move freely with little resistance. Put it back together and try it back out again. you could take some time to clean out the throttle body and IAC passages if you so desire. You can see some gunk here. Just use the same carburetor and intake cleaner spray. Fair warning, some cars like my Evo, that butterfly valve, if you try to clean it all the way, especially the edges, it doesn't seal all the way anymore, and then you just introduce a new air leak. When closed, you should not see any light gaps around the edges. So here, I would not go too ham on the edges, especially. Just get some of the excess crud out, and I think that's good enough. A legit question, why didn't I just replace this from the start? The whole idea behind troubleshooting is not to just jump to the most expensive part, but to isolate as many problems as possible. As I mentioned, I know for sure that I removed the throttle body while replacing the coolant hoses, and obviously I made some mistakes putting it back together. So we want to rule out the simple and cheap things first before getting to the really expensive parts. After I cleaned out the IAC, the reassembly is simply the reverse of removal. Let's start the car. That's normal. That's the RPMs. That's the engine pulling in a little bit more air and fuel to help with the cold starts. What should happen is that it should decrease as it warms up. So recap, the previous job I did caused a high idle in this car. I did the idle reset procedure, ECU reset, I added fresh gas. I tested the ECT and IAC sensors. I also adjusted the throttle cable tension. None of those did anything because there was a huge vacuum leaks in various places. When that happens, even the IAC, when it's fully open or closed, whichever it is, it can't compensate for all the extra air coming in. Additionally, the intake hose was mounted wrong. The throttle body gasket was also installed wrong, and there's a cracked vacuum hose. After I fixed all those, the remaining idle issues were caused by the IAC stuck open. I was able to solve it by cleaning it. Instead of buying a new one, you could try that first. Some things I didn't show in this video, you can also check the connector of the IAC for resistance. You could also check the connector itself for power, ground, signal as well. In my case, I opted to keep the original OEM IAC as long as possible. Aftermarket parts are always kind of eh. The idle is coming down. I'm checking my scan tool right now. On my other hand, the RPM is still at 1200. Overall, I rate this a 5 out of 5. Not quite difficulty, but rather the time involved trying to figure out multiple different problems. Again, most of that was my fault, but I am a DIY homeowner. This isn't a professional mechanic channel. Honestly, a professional mechanic working on these cars every day probably knows the ins and outs of what tends to go wrong. They probably know the IAC tends to get clogged up. You can read about these things in the forums just to get a heads up of what might be a problem. This kind of diagnosis will really test your patience at home. I hope this helped someone today. I know it was a kind of a long video. If it helped you out, please give a like, subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. One more thing I forgot to mention, when I initially put things back together, the first time I started the car, I had a really low idle. The opposite problem, it was around 500, engine was shaking. At that point, I really thought the IAC was stuck, in this case in the opposite direction. I thought it was stuck, maybe closed, and not enough air was getting in. In this case, I just simply disconnected the battery for 30 minutes and it solved the problem. As you can see here, the RPM, once the car fully warmed up, is 700 RPMs. With the AC on, it's a little bit higher, but it goes back down around the same range, okay? That's the number you're looking for. I believe it's 700 plus or minus 50.